In the world of business building, we often wonder if it could get any more complicated. GRC, GDPR, ESG, zero carbon, green hydrogen, cybersecurity, and big data. Let's not forget the long funding processes that can make you crazy. If you are a world changing founder and innovator, how do you connect with the support that you need to move ahead? Well, this podcast puts the people, planet, profit through partnerships theory to action by helping you to see opportunities in every episode to create a meaningful partnership. The innovators, experts, and diplomats we interview are all looking for partners, and that could be you. No time like the present to find out. So welcome to Frontrunners Innovate with your host, global business developer Mary Kurek. Hello, everyone. On the heels of the most recent UN General Assembly, how appropriate that we today have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about programs, particularly those that hit home in so many countries of the world. So I'm Mary Kurek, president of Frontrunners Development, a global business development company that connects business impact partners. And I'm your host for Frontrunners Innovate. Our guest today is Stefanos Fotiou, and he is the director of the Office of Sustainable Development Goals in the Food and Agriculture Organization at the United Nations, headquartered in Italy, in Rome specifically. So for future reference, if we refer to FAO, this is what we're talking about, Food and Agriculture Organization. His background in environment, climate, and general leadership in several areas of the United Nations is a great foundation for a conversation today around sustainable development, especially transformations as we start to learn more about food and agriculture as it impacts the world that we live in today. Our co-host today is a familiar face, is Ambassador Richard Swett, founder and CEO of Climate Prosperity Enterprise Solutions, focusing on sustainable, innovative communities in areas of the world in need, and they are headquartered in the United States. So we're going to start with Ambassador Swett. So I'm going to ask if he will give us a little intro into the work that he's doing, if you will. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mary. And it's a pleasure to be here. And Stefano, it's a pleasure meeting you. And I look forward to our conversation. I will be brief in order that our conversation be much more informative. And my brevity is that I have worked with the FAO. I know people who have worked high up in there. More specifically, I've worked with a partner or sister organization in the World Food Program. And I am working all over Africa looking for ways to implement food production for the World Food Program, but also for the food security solutions that Mary spoke briefly about in her introduction. And my background, I'm an architect that is designing new communities in 4 different African countries. I've traveled all throughout the continent and realized that relationships is where the foundations are best laid in order to create trusting relationships. So I have relationships in 4 countries that we are pursuing our projects in, and you can go to my website and take a look at the Malawi project. That's one of the countries. That gives you the best overview in a 4-minute video of what we're trying to do in these newly sustainable solar-powered communities. And the other countries that we're working in are Nigeria, Sudan, and South Sudan. And many of you who have experience in Africa are probably wondering why such the toughest neighborhoods. And the reason we're in those neighborhoods is, 1, I have good relationships in those countries. Number 2, they need us. We need to solve these problems. And as the song goes, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And this isn't New York. This is not Broadway. It is Africa. And my belief is that we can solve the problems there by addressing the worst, the most in need, I should say. And following that, demonstrate what has been accomplished there in the subsequent countries. So my experience comes from years of political experience as a member of Congress in the United States Congress, and as a member of the U.S. Diplomatic Corps as an ambassador. I served in the country of Denmark. But I have also worked with State Department. I've also continued to work in the political world here in the United States, as crazy as it is. I hope that I'm one of the more level-headed types that is a problem solver, and we're working on implementing solutions to the many problems that everyone all over the world is experiencing. So That's my background, and I have lots of questions for Stefano, so I'll let him give us a little bit about himself, and then we'll get right into it.
I just want to say this, what I've always loved about the work that you do, Ambassador Swett, is the fact that you tie sustainability to an enterprise solution. And that is sort of the crux of things is, you hit all of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in what you do with your efforts, and wrap it around the idea that in order to get to that place of sustainability, that you have to kind of have the people have an investment in it, and also create an enterprise to have people have that investment in that.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. Before Stefano gets his chance to say his piece, I will add to what you just said, Mary, and say that we have developed a platform we call the Prosperity Platform that has 3 aspects to it, and we call them SIMS 1, 2, 3. SIMS 1 is an evaluation of the architecture and engineering where we can model in 3-dimensional animated platform how that can be done in a way that saves 20% on construction and 50% on energy use, and it's a constant model that the community gets to look at and learn from. SIMS 2 is the businesses that operate in that model, and in many of our development communities, the primary business is agriculture, and that's why this conversation with Stefanos is so important to me. And then the third is SIMS 3, which is the societal and social aspects of that community's accumulating and achieving the 17 goals that the UN set out, the strategic development goals, sustainable development goals set out by the UN. And so these 3 things are measured and reported on a regular basis, and it gives the people in these communities greater confidence, higher success rates, and it is a new and untried, not ever done before platform that we're hoping that will be utilized in the development world with great regularity.
Thank you. So Stefanos, let's find out a little bit more about your background, because I love seeing the fact that, that you have come through several different areas of the United Nations, which I always think gives a greater experience to do what you're doing each step of the way. You've had, I think you said before we hit record that you had 18 years experience throughout the United Nations. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, thanks, Mary, and very nice to meet you, and very nice to meet you, Ambassador Swett here. I have 18 years experience in the UN system, but I had a professional life also before the UN system. So let me start from there. I am, by training, my first degree is on forestry and natural environment, and that was really something that passionated me, especially the natural environment part, the conservation of natural environment. But through my studies, I found a kind of interest to look at the development aspect of the conservation of natural resources. And that's why my PhD was on natural resource economics, where I try to understand not only the conservation part, but the development part. And when I started my career, I spent about 12 years before the UN in, I would say, three different sectors. One was research and academia, where I tried to understand really the connections between conservation, development, economics, but also the needs of the societies and the local communities, especially the local communities. Then I spent another 4 years in a non-governmental organization in my country, in Greece, where the focus was on how we can bring the paradigm of sustainable development at the local level. So we were working with farmers, with fishermen, that actually they had conflicts with nature, but they didn't know that actually they don't have conflicts, but nature is their ally. And then I spent another 4 years on the private sector, working actually on regional sustainable development from a business-oriented point. And after these 12 years, I changed my path and I joined the UN system. I joined first the UN Environment Program back in 2005, where I spent 10 years in 3 different positions. The first one was I was responsible for sustainable tourism in UNEP. Then I went to the regional office of UNEP in Asia and the Pacific, and I established there the UNEP program in Asia Pacific for green economy and sustainable consumption and production. And then back to UNEP in an office in Paris, where I led the unit on sustainable cities and lifestyles. After 10 years in UNEP, I moved to the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific in Bangkok, where I served as the director of the Division of Environment and Sustainable Development. And 2 years ago, in September 2021, after 6 years in ESCAP, I joined FAO as the director of the Office of Sustainable Development Goals. So through these 30 years, 12 in research, academia, private sector, and 18 in the UN, I'm trying to explore actually different aspects of sustainable development. And I think I'm always learning. And I try in each place I go to bring the lessons from the previous place and advance a little bit the agenda. Because if we really want to be very frank, if we look the last 50 years where the big discussion on sustainable development started, I have something like the 1972 as a big milestone for me, because it was the first conference on development and environment. We have really improved our knowledge, but I'm not sure how much we have improved our actions and our results on sustainability. So let me leave the introduction here.
I think that's
great. Wonderful. Go ahead. The first thing that I'd like to ask Stefanos is, what do you see right now as being the most urgent thing that needs to be implemented with regard to the work that you're doing in environmental sustainability?
So I think that, if I want to be politically correct, I need to say that you see 17 sustainable development goals behind me, and this is the strategy. So this is our beacon, this is our blueprint on what needs to happen. We do recognize, though, that there are some clusters of action that really can accelerate the SDGs. And I want to highlight 3 of them when it comes to the environment part, and I want to highlight 1 when it comes to the social part, because it's also extremely important. On the environment part, I think that work on energy systems, work on land and water, and then work on agri-food systems is extremely crucial. If we get together these 3, I don't want to call them sectors because they're not sectors, but these 3 clusters of activities, energy, water, land, and agri-food systems, I think we will solve a very big part of our sustainability problem. And this is because if we look at these areas, we see, first of all, that they are really related to the daily life of every citizen, and they are really related to the basis of the well-being of the people. So they are related to what shelter they have, what food they have, what kind of social protection they might have. And we know that when in a society you manage to solve basic issues like shelter, like food, like social security, then this society can progress. And this society can then look at how it will advance. So let me say that, yes, we have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but I see on the environment part these 3 areas. There's another extremely important area, which I think is the area of equality and social protection, because we have the data to support the argument that the last 20 or 30 years poverty is reducing, but unfortunately we have other data that we see inequality is increasing. So we might have less absolutely poor people, but the inequality is increasing, and this creates a number of societal problems and a number of risks, because people feel that there are many people that they feel that they have left behind. And this is why one of the overarching ideas behind the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs is to leave no one behind. So we are facing, on the environment part, what we call the triple planetary crisis of climate, pollution, and biodiversity loss, and the social problem of inequality and not social protection at a unified level.
I think that many times I'm hearing people talk about the environment and sustainability and whatnot in dramatic, dire, consequential terms. That if we don't do something, in 10 years, we will no longer exist. And I think that a lot of people that I have found all over the world, but particularly in the United States, they've lost faith in government because of this overstating of the problem and overstating of the solution, making it nearly impossible to implement on the time frame with the dire consequences that are being stated. I think that the trust that people have in government, that have in the systems for fixing the problems, are much more successful and can be better managed if you take it in milestone steps, along the way, and you keep track of those milestones in a way that gives you something to celebrate. I'll give you an example that if you have the ability to create a milestone that every month you're achieving a much lower a goal or objective, but you have a very high probability of achieving that, you can build the momentum in the public to believe that they can do the bigger things further down the line. But if you tell them that they have to do something and that if they don't, dire consequences will occur, which we honestly know are not really going to, because we've already had people predict that the world would end by the year 2020, and here we are. So, my feeling is that we are working on a double-edged sword. We're trying to build trust and faith in the public to participate in these programs, and we also want the programs to succeed, so that we're not setting goals that come 2030 from the Paris Accord or whatever various meetings that were being held, they haven't been accomplished. And so I'm very curious to understand your approach and how you see this can be done. And before I finish with this one question, I'll give you one more example. I've traveled all over the world, all over Africa. I've spoken directly with the two generals who are currently warring with each other in Sudan before they started the conflict, but very, very shortly before. So I had a sense from that meeting that things were not going well and that they were not going to be able to come to some kind of accord. But what I asked them was a very simple thing along the lines that I'm talking about. And that is, in Sudan, everywhere you go, there's trash all over the place. It's just terrible. And what I said to them was, if you took your Saturday morning and acted as an example to the population and went out and cleaned up the roadway in front of your palace or your offices or wherever it is that you are, and you encouraged people to do that in front of their homes as well, you would build a pride in the country that doesn't seem to exist right now. And you would create a cleaner environment that would begin the ball rolling towards the sustainability goals that we all believe are very important and want to achieve. So this is, and the response I got from both of them, they were not in the meeting together, it was two separate meetings, was really to consider me with a very strong and disdainful look. And to say that was beneath their position in the government and in the population. And, it just seemed to me that it was a wasted opportunity that could have started to build the kind of cooperation and effective work that might lead to bigger and better things.
Ambassador, thank you very much. It's a complex question, and I'll try just to put it down in three different parts in my answer. One, and let me start from the easy. Do we need a combination of small steps to achieve the big goals? Yes, we do need. Is this sufficient? Is this necessary? Yes, it's necessary. Is it sufficient? I'm afraid to say it's not. So the incremental steps and what we have seen the last 30 years, they do create a very small impact. I want to go on this first part of my answer and give you an example, and actually just put some numbers. I'll go in an item that I consider is extremely important when it comes to sustainable development, which is energy. So I'm not going to talk about the consumption of different sources of energy, but I'm going to give you some percentages. So in 2000, when we get the global energy consumption by source, if we isolate three sources, which is the fossil fuels, so oil, coal, and gas, the accumulative percentage of the global consumption in these three sources was 72.33%. 77.3%. 77.3%. The latest data I have for the energy consumption, they go to 2021. I don't have the data for 2022. Could you make a guess, Ambassador? During the last 21 years, that we were in 77.3% on energy, with all these things that we are listening, I mean, we're listening a lot, you know, new solar plants, new wind plants. How much this 77.3% has been reduced? Do you have a guess where it is today?
Oh, it's hardly been touched at all. And then one of the biggest problems is that we're putting too much emphasis on alternative and renewable energy sources that are not base-loaded, baseline, consistent suppliers. The intermittency of the wind turbines and the fact that—
Ambassador, with all due respect here, with all due respect, yes, you're absolutely right. The 77.3 is constant, 77.3. So there's nothing changed there. And actually, what's happening?
We're working on the wrong solutions.
We are emitting much more resources than, we're emitting much more CO2 than was happening 20 years ago, because the absolute consumption of energy between 2000 and in the year 2000, I think it was about 100,000 terawatts, has gone to 160,000 terawatts. So a 60% increase on the consumption with absolutely zero reduction of the fossil fuels. And I can't accept that this is because we don't invest on the right forms. I think, actually, I can accept that this is because we invest on turbines, as you say, wind turbines or solar. No, it's not. It's because still all the incentives and all the big money are given to invest on oil, coal, and gas, on the fossil fuels. So well, yes, incremental gains on the wind and hydropower. So I mean, the solar in 2000, I think the solar was below 0.1%. That was the solar. And in 2021, the solar is about 1.3. So that's an incremental change, but it has not changed the problem and the problem is worse. That's my first.
And if I can just add to what you're saying, I totally agree with what you're saying. And the other problem that we're having is that we are turning aside our attention. And I should qualify this by saying that in 2004, I helped write one of the presidential candidates' energy policy for the United States presidential election of 2004. And in that, we focused on running a transition that had us relying on clean fuel sources like nuclear. Of course, nuclear has its one big problem of nuclear waste, but it is producing electricity without producing CO2 in the air. And so that has a tremendously positive impact in helping make that transition. But we also are going to have to look at very closely what the development of the middle class in India and China is going to do with regard to emissions worldwide in the coming years as well. So we have not only the energy production side to be concerned about, but we also have the pollution side with regard to bringing these emerging economies into middle class status with all of the energy consumption that takes place in those. So you're right, it's a very complicated issue that needs to be addressed on all fronts.
So, I mean, my first point is that, yes, small actions, baby steps, as we say, recycle your garbage, try to have a renewable source of electricity it's something necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I think we need the big action. And the big action, and I'm going to this, my second part of the answer, why it has not happening so far. It has not happening so far because I think we haven't restructured the global finance system. The global finance system is a system that it rewards the brown economy, it rewards the polluting economy, because it's a system that it doesn't accept risks, and actually it calculates risks only with the economics that we know from the 50s. And the economics that we know from the 50s are completely out of any sense today. So by using really, if you want, at some point, the economics of the 50s, they became an ideology. By making economics an ideology and having always the same set of policies, the last 50 years that an international finance institution or national finance institutions are taking decisions is a very big part of the problem. Now, on the actual thing, are we going to be doomed in 10 years? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a futurologist, but I don't think that if projections go as today, the Earth will stop existing in 10 years. And yes, I will agree with you that the 10 years is probably an exaggeration. But you need to understand these people that they go out and they say, we have only 10 years, because they're really sick and tired for so many years just listening that we're going to do something on sustainability, and we don't do. And yes, they go to the other extreme. What I can say, though, is the following. Maybe we will still be alive. I mean, the ones that they will be able to be alive in 10 years, but and the life will be still life on Earth. But we need to consider what kind of life this is going to be. Yes, because if we see how much increase we have the last years on sickness because of pollution, how much natural increase of natural disasters we have because of the climate emergency, and what this means for people, what means for their income, what means for their food, what means for their shelter. We have millions of people that every year they lose their jobs, they lose their income, they lose their food, they lose their house because of the impacts of climate change. So the projections here are not good. We're going to have more intense events, and the destructive power of this event will be increasing. So we talk about natural disasters, but it's not. The disaster is actually not natural. It's a natural effect that creates the disaster because we haven't taken measures. And if we don't really see how we are going to address the problem, I think that the overreaction sometimes from the environment part of the agenda is there because it seems that the reaction that it's based on science and on a political correct language, it's not really achieving anything.
So you're in a position to advocate for sustainable development on many fronts, not just on agriculture. You have a very strong background on many fronts. Why aren't we investing? I propose zero carbon development in emerging economies, and it is not impossible. It's very difficult to get funding for these types of projects. And quite honestly, if we would develop or support the funding for these kinds of projects in the emerging economies in particular, we would have the largest impact, because that's where the opportunity for, as I was talking about earlier, for emerging into the middle class society is the greatest. And it will have the greatest negative impact on the environment if we don't figure out how to use energy more cleanly, cleaner energy, not only from the renewable resource aspect, but also how we process the pollution that comes from the energy that is used from the fossil fuels and nuclear and things like that are still in the transitional phase. So, these are the things that people in your position should be supporting, should be financing, should be giving all of the support to, in order that these technologies can be developed and can be replacing the more polluting and deadlier technologies that are currently in place.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, a shift on investments on technologies is what is needed. I mean, at least in FAO, we are not really financing because we're not a financing institution.
No, you're not.
Others do this, but we do advocate actually for the use of new technologies and sustainable technologies for agriculture. One week ago, we had a conference here in Rome on sustainable agricultural mechanization and how sustainable agricultural mechanization can fulfill two very big needs: to produce food in an effective and productive and efficient way, and at the same time reduce the consequences in the environment and the people. I think the key is with the finance institutions, and not only the global public one, but really the private ones, the fund managers. I mean, consider that there are trillions of dollars that they are managed out there by no more than 50 big funds, and actually 3 or 4 of them, they are managing probably 20% of these available funds. So we need to decarbonize the portfolios. If the portfolios will not be decarbonized, we cannot see any change. So if the portfolios of the investment funds, of the pension funds, are still based on stocks and on options that they are in the coal industry, in the oil industry, which is profitable. Yeah, the last year we know that this is a profitable industry. If they don't shift, then we will not see change, because because what's happening is that these funds, they are fueling money to all these unsustainable activities. Can you change this? I mean, can you really ask the private sector, the people that they manage private money, to shift their investment? It's not easy, because they will tell you, I'm an investment fund. I'm looking at my profitability and what I will give to my investors. But I think you can do other things. You can do your economy and your burden sharing more fair, and start applying some basic principles like the polluter paying principle. And if there are actually activities, and I'm talking about these finance activities, that they are creating pollution, they have to pay for them. So we are creating huge externalities for people. I mean, we make people having more cancers, more problems with their cardiovascular system. And this is happening because very few amount of people are profiting out of investments in areas that they are creating these externalities.
But that's where the FAO and organizations like that can come in and apply pressure, because at this point in time, you said it yourself, the funds that are the financial funds that are profitable are making their profits off of old technologies and off of fossil fuels that are still in use. That's all understood and believable, but they are not going to make a change unless the pressure is brought to them, and that pressure will come either politically or it'll come, by natural causes. As you say, we have natural disasters that are not natural any longer. They are inflated because of the higher ocean temperatures, or because of whatever other instances that cause them to be extreme. In the midst of all this, I think that we have to find who are the people that are most productively working towards the solution. And one person comes to my mind. I'm curious if you'd ever heard of him. He's no longer alive. He died in 2019, but he was a Swedish doctor by the name of Hans Rosling. And Hans Rosling had a last 25 years of his professional life, he dedicated to studying the correlation between health and wealth. And he, very quickly, I'm going to oversimplify, a very complicated subject, but I'm using it for a purpose. And that conclusion that he came to is that the human experience for the last 200 years continues to improve. We are healthier and wealthier, meaning healthier, we live longer, and wealthier, that we have more capital per capita in our pockets than we have ever had before in the past. And that this is applicable to all countries around the globe, no matter where they are. Of course, some are slower in accumulating this, and others are very rapid. But the bottom line is that he says that when you look at all of the catastrophes that happen to humanity, either human caused or natural causes, we seem to get through them and continue to improve. And his argument is that this is because we as a species are constantly looking for solutions and finding solutions to overcome these catastrophic events. I tend to be an optimist in looking at the world the same way that Hans Rosling does, and believing that we, yes, are working hard, we have to work harder, but we will find this solution to this problem, so long as we continue to work at it, and so long as we have all organizations that have the ability to applying the pressure, and the organizations who can provide the capital to fund these projects, to put that money on the table so that these kinds of solutions can be developed and actually commercialized.
Let me start from the income thing, and this kind of notion that everybody has become better over the years. It's a statistical artifact. It's a statistical mistake here. Yeah, it's yes, maybe the GDP per person is increasing, but this is happening because we aggregate everything and we divide by the number of the population. I'm confident when I said that inequality is increasing. Right now, the poorest 50% of the population owns just 2% of the total net wealth. This is worse than what was happening 30 years ago, where this 50% was owning something 5%. So yes, the statistics show averages that improving, but I'm sorry, what's happening here is that for some are extremely increasing and for some others are decreasing. And yes, the average is somewhere right there. So I don't buy this argument. I don't buy this argument on the GDP and the fact that we have really using the GDP as the only indicator of human development. This is unacceptable.
Right. And as I said, Stefanos, this was a gross oversimplification, and I don't argue your point. Your point is spot on. But the fact of the matter is that we tend to let ourselves become paralyzed by the negative, as opposed to breaking down and investing in and creating the positive. And I think that's something that we as a species have proven time and time again that we can eventually overcome and succeed in going into the future.
Ambassador, my problem is that with oversimplification, and especially oversimplification that is based on scientific research, we are creating the wrong signals. So yes, I'm very optimistic, and I do believe on the power of the human species to correct things. But we don't see something like this happening, at least for the last 30 years that I'm into this arena of sustainable development. And I don't know, all the indicators that have to do with the sustainable development, they are going worse. I'll give you a very simple one. I mean, we asked the Swedish science that you quoted. We haven't even solved the basic problem of hunger. And back in 2015, we had about 7.9% of the population under extreme hunger, and today we have 9.2. So where's the improvement here? I mean, maybe their income, and I'll tell you something, maybe their per capita income increased over here, probably. But the food prices went maybe 3 or 4 times up on what it was the increase of their income. So we can't really isolate a couple of things and make a story on all of them. And that's why, at least in the UN and in FAO, we make the big story on the basis of these 17 SDGs. Because when you see all of them, you understand that Houston, we have a problem. Because the latest assessment shows that out of all the indicators, we have only 15% of them, only 15% of them are going to the right direction. All the others are either too slow or are going to the opposite direction. Yes, I can make a very beautiful story if I pick up a couple of indicators on children mortality, on education, and probably on income. But that's all. The nice story ends here.
But you miss my point in saying that at the various COP meetings and the various meetings on sustainability, the targets are set so high that they aren't even being half met, let alone being met. And I think that somewhere between my perspective and your perspective, there is a realistic perspective that should set down, these are the goals that we can achieve and we will achieve and we must achieve. And we do that first, and we get the investment, we get the finances available to make that possible. Because I, as an entrepreneur trying to build these zero carbon communities in Africa, you go to my website, you'll see, I'm not talking to you from the simplistic viewpoint of this conversation. I'm just using this conversation to draw out the differences between the two sides. I'm right there in the middle trying to create a solution that actually does put food in people's mouth, that gives them ownership of capital so that they can realize improvement in their financial wherewithal as they work through the years, that they have a house that they can call their own. These are the things that I am working to achieve. But if I can't get financing to do that, it's not going to happen. And that's the problem, is that our financial institutions are not giving money to those kinds of projects that maybe they're not as profitable as the oil being pumped out of Nigeria or some other factor. But
so where's the problem with the targets here?
Still
because
profitable.
The targets are based on science. So the 1.5 degree target is not an arbitrary number that came out of a brainstorming of politicians. It's based on science. We have assessment reports from hundreds of thousands of scientists that they set up, that we say, okay, that's the target for the climate, 1.5 degrees. Last year, we had some specific targets on biodiversity. All of them are based on science. So the targets actually, and I have to say, Ambassador, the targets are not ambitious at all. With 1.5 degree increase in the temperature, we still have very big consequences. So I can't really buy the argument that the targets are so ambitious.
Stefanos, we're not making any progress. We should be doing things that make progress. And there are things out there that we could be doing that would make progress. But no, we don't want to talk about those things because they are not considered important enough. My belief is you've got to accomplish something to get the ball rolling. And then on momentum, you will achieve your 1.5 degree targets or your other targets that you set. But right now, we're not getting anywhere close to that. And it's all a lot of, pardon the expression, hot air being talked about getting to those targets. And that's what I'm trying to say, is we need to be realistic and actually more focused on actually accomplishing something than having all of this talk and creating all of this disappointment or this lack of belief that this is possible in the public, because that's the effect that talking big goals and not achieving them really, I think, has done to our public.
Well, I mean, I think we agree that things are not going well, are not progressing. And
right.
I think another thing we agree also on is that they're not progressing because the money, they don't go to the right purposes.
We agree on 98% of the stuff, Stefanos, but the 2% that we don't agree on is how do you engage the public to actually accomplish the goals? And I don't think that we are succeeding in that process right now.
I think it's not so much about the public. I really think it's about the policies.
Well, they elect the leaders who make the policies. So
yes, they elect the leaders who make the policies.
Process in that way.
That's democracy. That's democracy. Right. Okay, and we can't blame democracy because it comes with all the package. It's not an a la carte system. It comes with everything. With the fact that even the people that we disagree, they have the same right to vote as we have. So I think the politicians, they have other means that they can be pressured on. And right now, we don't have a convincing means either from the corporate sector, either from the non-for-profit sector to influence the politicians. Because many times we have seen also, and we know, that politicians are elected on promises that they don't hold. So, and I must say that we also see another very negative thing, that politicians are elected with promises for environmental sustainability that then they abandon them. And they betray the voters, correct? So, and we need to see finally who is the one that has the leverage to change the mind of the politicians, and consequently, the politicians will take the right decisions and will institute the right policies, and they will influence the finance institutions and the players that they can do sustainable development happen and make this happen. The point that I can't really agree is that it's not the high ambition that makes the public not engaged on this. I think it's an agenda that it's actually pushed to the public, and I very much believe that the public is educated, correct? So the education at right time, and I'm not talking about the formal education, but the whole advocacy that is happening out there, it's not the one that helps the public to come up to a realization that is about our livelihood. And part of the mistakes that they have been done in advocacy are also to be found in the environmental movement. At some point, I do think that we didn't project the right messages. So instead of saying that the climate change is a problem for people, we were saying that the climate change is a problem for nature. Yes, it is a problem for nature, but primarily the climate change is a problem for the people.
Yeah, so these are the challenges that I think are confronting all of us. And unless and until we figure out how to work through these issues in a cooperative and collective and in a team fashion, we're going to continue to see failure with regard to achieving these goals that are being set. And that's the frustration that I have, as you can tell. And I'm working on providing solutions one community at a time. And once we can prove that that's possible, then we have the ability to go into places like China and places like India and to develop opportunity for what some have termed the non-consuming public. And you rightfully pointed out, they are the have-nots. They're the people that don't own 98% of the assets of the planet. Those are the people that need to be empowered, but also need to be empowered in a way that they don't contribute to the added climate issues that are plaguing our planet.
And I think we need to, and I'm inspired here from something that my Director General in FAO says, that we need to use a combination of science, innovation, technology, finance to really address the problem. When he was talking to the SDG summit, he said that agri-food system transformation is a key for all SDGs, and we need to have also a plethora of means of implementation to make this happen. And the second item, and this comes from the UN Secretary General, is that he openly said during the SDG summit that we need a redistribution of power. And he said this when he was talking to the youth. And he said to the youth also that you need to know that power is never given. You need to take this power for you. So this redistribution of power from one side and the use of multiple means of implementation, I think it's a recipe for success.
Well, I encourage you to take a look at our project that we're doing in Malawi. It'll give you a very comprehensive view of how we approach this type of development. And it will help you get reports on all of those 17 goals that you've got displayed behind you in your office. I think it's something that we need to spend a lot more time figuring out how to show progress, as opposed to just speaking about the long-term goals based on dire circumstances.
Yes. Wow, this has been a think tank. I love it. Welcome to the Frontrunners Innovate think tank. This has been eye-opening, and some of the statistics that you've shared and some of the ideas back and forth and a perspective switch off, Stefanos. So thank you for that. And Ambassador Swett, I always enjoy hearing some of the ideas that come forward, and you're so well read with some of the information you get from different places. I appreciate that. Stefanos, I want to I want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about, just as we end up, if there's any program, any direction that you're going on that's new for maybe going into the next year that you're working on, and if there's any new types of partners or people that you might be interested in connecting with in any particular geographic region or type of population that you're looking to reach out to.
So I mean, sure, in the Food and Agriculture Organization, we're looking at developing countries and in all regions. So developing countries is our main target. And the FAO has actually a plethora of tools and activities that it tries to prioritize to make things happen. We recognize something that we call low-hanging fruits, at least on our fight against hunger. The food loss and waste is a very low-hanging fruit. It is an area, Ambassador, that I think all of us will have a very big responsibility. And it's an area that very small regulation can do miracles. We see countries, for example, that they have prohibited supermarkets of throwing away food. And this created a very big momentum, actually, towards having more food for the poor, not wasting resources, and actually making things more profitable. Yes, in the beginning, there was a lot of complaints because it needed some cost to come up to the new system, but at the end, this cost was offset. Another area that FAO is working is under a big initiative. It's called Hand in Hand, and this is trying to apply scientific solutions at the field and to come up with the right policy recommendations on how the entire agricultural plan of a country, the agricultural strategy should be developed. Also, we are looking into the issue of the consumption because it's extremely important, and to promote healthy diets, because the dividend here is double. From the one side, you make better to the environment. From the other side, you make better to the health of the people. I mean, we know that today we're facing the issue where we have people that they go hungry and they cannot eat, but only have increased obesity with whatever the morbid obesity is coming from. So there is a variety of tools. We're working on them, and we need as much as support, I would say, from the ministries of development and the ministries of finance, because these are the ones that at the end will make the transformations happen. We do have cases where the ministers of agriculture, the ministers of environment, they come up with very good plans. If the ministers of finance are not behind them, then it's going to be difficult. So that's why I think the biggest partners in this transformation process is the finance world and the development.
No, I think you're absolutely right. You'll see from our approach, we work with greenhouse farmers. That's our partner in Malawi, and smart farming is what we believe is absolutely necessary, because one of the ways that you deal with how you mitigate the natural issues such as drought or flooding or whatever in today's world is that you build a controlled environment around your agriculture production that can keep those things outside the building, if you will. And so we're working on smart farms that grow vertically as opposed to horizontally, that are inside greenhouses, that have controlled environments that can help mitigate against drought and against the excessive rains that happen in today's natural climates, so that these people can continue to produce on a predictable and ongoing basis.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you make me think of also, I was talking with a gentleman in Nigeria that works with a funding source that funds like seeds and things like that to help localized farmers to grow food. But, you know, they found out that they ran into a problem that people were actually eating the seeds. And so they were advised to provide, you know, some seed for them to eat and then some seed for them to plant, because they realized they weren't going to get anywhere if they didn't give them something to eat as well as to plant, because they were going to eat it anyway. And that sounds really awful to say, but they were advised that, you know, this is what you're going to have to do if you expect them to use some of that to actually plant, to grow something with, because, you know, they're hungry. So they're going to eat it. But yeah, you do what you got to do to get something done. So I want to say thank you to all of you here, all of you watching, and I'm going to ask you guys to stay here for just a second as I say goodbye to everyone else. If you're watching this wherever you get your podcast, go to www.frontrunnersinnovate.com where you'll get this, and you'll also get the information that will provide you on LinkedIn and all the bios and that sort of thing on these gentlemen. So thank you again, Ambassador Swett, and thank you, Stefanos. We really appreciate it. I appreciate all that you're doing, both of you, for everything that you're doing for sustainability. So thank you and goodbye. Hello.